The third classification of colloids is associated colloids, which are also known as micelles. There are some substances which at low concentrations behave as normal strong electrolyte, but at higher concentration exhibit colloidal behavior due to the formation of aggregates. So here we will see that there will be the substances which at low concentration behaves as a normal strong electrolytes, but at higher concentration exhibit colloidal behavior. So here more than one molecules will get aggregated or accumulated, or we can say collected at one place, and due to this reason they are showing colloidal behavior, because in that case their size becomes bigger, equal to colloidal size. The aggregated particles thus formed are called micelles. These are also known as associated colloids. The formation of micelles takes place only above a particular temperature called Kraft temperature, that is TK. So in order to form micelles of such substances, generally we will see that soap and detergent are forming micelles. So molecules of soap or detergent can form micelles only at a temperature above Kraft temperature, as well as the minimum concentration which is required for the formation of micelle should be above critical micelle concentration. So at critical micelle concentration, micelle formation will not take place. It will take place above critical micelle concentration. So we will see that when they are undergoing concentrated at one place, collected at one place, they form micelle. But when they are diluted, so by addition of water, if they are diluted, then again they convert into free molecules. So in that case they convert into free molecules or negative ions. So on dilution, these colloids revert back into individual ions. So generally, which substances form micelles? So surface active agents, that means soap and detergent, belong to this class. For soaps, the CMC, that is critical micelle concentration, is 10 raised to minus 4 to 10 raised to minus 3 mole per liter. So that means for soap, in order to form micelles, the concentration of soap should be above 10 raised to minus 4 to 10 raised to minus 3 mole per liter. These colloids have both lyophobic and lyophilic parts, that is water loving and water hating parts. Micelle may contain as many as 100 molecules or more than 100 molecules. So when 100 or more than 100 soap molecules are getting aggregated at one place, then they form micelles. Now let us see mechanism of micelle formation. Let us take the example of soap solutions. Soap is sodium or potassium salt of higher fatty acids and may be represented as RCOO minus Na plus. For example, sodium stearate. So formula is CH3 CH2 16 times COONA, or we can say C17H35 COONA. And here there is a ionic bond between carboxylate ion and sodium ion, which is a major component of many bar soaps. When dissolved in water, it dissociates into RCOO minus and Na plus. So when we are dissolving soap in water, it gets dissociated into RCOO minus and Na plus. So here we will see that we are taking ionic compound only in order to dissolve it in water. Otherwise, in order to remove dirt from the surface of the cloth, only carboxylate ion plays a role. Na plus does not play any role in the removal of dirt. So carboxylate ion has two parts, a long hydrocarbon chain. Suppose over here we can see that R is C17H35. So that means it is from here to here it is C17H35. When we are writing CH3, CH2, 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 then it becomes C17H35, and at the end we are having COO minus and Na plus. So here we will see that Na plus has no role in removal of dirt. So dirt is removed by the remaining part, that means C17H35 COO minus. Here we will see that this part, that is C17H35, that is called hydrophobic tail, that is water hating tail, because it is a non-polar hydrocarbon chain, so it repels water. But this part, that is COO minus ion, that is negatively charged ions, and it is called hydrophilic head, that means it is water loving head. So we can show the molecule of soap as a tail. Okay, so the tail shows hydrocarbon chain, and so zigzag line can be drawn in a bond line structure, and at the end we are having hydrophilic head, that is water loving head. So here we will see that initially when we dissolve soap in water, then the negative head of the soap, which is water loving, it remains inside the water, that is hydrophilic head remains inside the water, and hydrophobic tail, that is water hating tail, remains away from water. So that's why we can see that the froth of soap is generally formed on the surface of water. Now here we will see that at the surface of water, arrangement of stearate ions will be of this kind at low concentrations of soap. But at critical micelle concentration of soap, that is at higher concentration, the stearate ion will go inside the water, and after going inside the water, they will form a periphery surrounding a circle. So they will form a spherical arrangement of stearate ion is formed, in which the water hating tail remains towards the center and water loving head is at the periphery of the circle, or we can say at the boundary of the circle. So here we will see that an aggregate thus formed is known as ionic micelle. So this is ionic micelle, which is shown in figure B. These micelles may contain as many as 100 such ions. Similarly, in case of detergent, for example, sodium lauryl sulfate, so its formula is CH3CH211 SO4 minus Na plus. So here also we can see that there is a hydrocarbon tail, okay, that is CH3CH211, and at the end we are having sodium sulfate. So that is the formula of sodium lauryl sulfate. In this, Na plus plays a role only to get the detergent dissolved in water. Otherwise, the remaining part functions for the removal of dirt from the clothes. So in detergent also we can see that there is a hydrophobic tail, just like in case of soap, and hydrophilic head, just like in case of soap. Only the difference is that in soap the head is COO minus, while here the head is SO4 minus. So polar group is SO4 minus along with the long hydrocarbon tail. Hence the micelle formation mechanism of detergent is same as that of soap. So both are forming the micelle in the same way. Now next is cleansing action of soap. It has been mentioned earlier that the micelle consists of hydrophobic tail, or we can say hydrophobic hydrocarbon like central core. So here we will see that in the micelle, the central core contains hydrophobic tail. The cleansing action of soap is due to the fact that soap molecules form micelle around the oil droplet in such a way that hydrophobic part of the stearate ion is in the oil droplet, and the hydrophilic part projects out of the grease droplet like the bristles. Here we can see that in figure A, a cloth is there. On the surface of the cloth there is a grease. In figure B, stearate ion arranges around the grease droplet in such a way that their tail, which is water hating, goes away from water. So tail goes away from the water, that means it goes inside the dirt or grease, and the hydrophilic head, they remain outside as they are water loving. And finally, when we are adding water, or we are washing the cloth with water, then in that case this grease gets detached from the surface of the cloth, and afterwards it become a spherical grease droplet, surrounding which the soap molecules arrange themselves in the form of micelles. So we will see that since the polar groups can interact with water, the oil droplet surrounded by stearate ion is now pulled in water and removed from the dirt surface. So it is removed from the dirt surface. So it is pulled away from the surface of the cloth. Thus, soap helps in emulsification and washing away of oils and fats. So here we will see that emulsion will be formed between soap and water. Okay, when liquid get dissolved in liquid, that is called emulsion. So here emulsification takes place between soap and water, and washing away of oil and fat take place from the surface of the cloth. The negatively charged sheet around the globules. Okay, so here we will see that there is a oil droplet which is known as globules, and surrounding the globules there is a negatively charged sheet or layer surrounding the globules. It prevents them from coming together and forming aggregates. So we will see that in between any two micelle which are present in the dirty water after washing of cloth, as we know that dirt along with soap molecule goes into the water. So here we will see that any two neighboring micelles which are there will have a negative layer on the surface, so they will repel each other. Okay, like charges will repel each other. So that means these micelles will not come close to each other, they will remain away from each other. Now next topic is preparation of colloids. A few important methods for the preparation of colloids are as follows. Number A, chemical methods. Colloidal dispersions can be prepared by chemical reactions leading to formation of molecules by double decomposition, oxidation, reduction and hydrolysis processes. Here we will see that by the chemical reaction we can convert different reactants into different colloids. So here we will see that these molecules which are present on the product side, they get collected or aggregated at one place in order to form a molecule of colloidal size. So first is decomposition reaction. Arsenic oxide, that is As2O3, reacts with hydrogen sulfide H2S by double decomposition reaction to form arsenic sulfide and water. So here we will see that arsenic oxide is there, As2O3. It reacts with hydrogen sulfide by double decomposition reaction. So it will form arsenic sulfide, As2S3 plus water. So we have to balance the equation here. In case of arsenic oxide there are 3 oxygens, so we will multiply H2O with 3. Then we are having 3 2s are 6 hydrogen, so here we will write 3H2S. So now the equation is balanced. So in this way, here we will see that the product arsenic sulfide will act as a colloidal sole. Now, so this is the double decomposition method to prepare arsenic sulfide sole. Now if we have to prepare sulfur sole, then what is the method? That we have to take sulfur dioxide and treat it with H2S by oxidation reaction. So in that case, elemental sulfur will be formed along with water. So here we will see that here in case of sulfur dioxide we are having 2 oxygen. So here we have to multiply 2 with water. Then in that case we are having 2 2s are 4 hydrogen. So in this case you have to write 2H2S. Then we are having 2 sulfur over here and 1 sulfur over here, 3 sulfur. So here we have to write 3S. Now if you want to prepare gold sole, so in order to prepare gold sole we have to take auric chloride, that is AuCl3. So auric chloride when reduced with formaldehyde in the presence of water So it will undergo reduction. So finally we will get gold. So gold chloride will undergo reduction, and formaldehyde will itself undergo oxidation to form formic acid HCOOH along with hydrochloric acid. So here we will see that in case of gold chloride, if you take 2 times gold chloride, 2 times AuCl3, then in that case we are having 2 times Au, then we are having 2 3s are 6 chlorine. So here we have to write down 6 HCl. Now here we will see that if we take 3 moles of formaldehyde and 3 moles of water, then in that case each oxygen of water will be given to 1 formaldehyde. So all the 3 oxygen of water will be given to 3 formaldehyde to form 3 times formic acid. And now we are remaining with 3 2s are 6 hydrogen and 2 3s are 6 chlorine. So that's why it will form 6 HCl. Now number 4th is preparation of ferric hydroxide sol. So for that we have to take ferric chloride FeCl3 and treat it with water. So that is hydrolysis. So by hydrolysis we can convert ferric chloride into precipitates of ferric hydroxide, which are brown color precipitates, and freshly prepared ferric hydroxide precipitates can thereafter be broken down into colloidal size. So we will get ferric hydroxide sol and plus HCl. So here we will see that here we are having 3 times chlorine in FeCl3, so that's why we will write 3 HCl over here. Then we are having 3 and 3, 6 hydrogen and 3 oxygen. So here we have to write down 3 H2O. So that is hydrolysis. So these are the 4 chemical methods: double decomposition, oxidation, reduction and hydrolysis for the preparation of various sols. Now next method is electrical disintegration or Bragg arc method. Electrical disintegration means to break down in the presence of electricity, and this method is also called Bragg arc method. This method is generally used to prepare colloidal sol of costly metals such as gold, silver and platinum. So this method may be asked in the exam indirectly also. So direct question may not be there like electrical disintegration or Bragg arc method. They may ask, okay, explain the method to prepare colloidal sol of costly metals such as gold, silver and platinum. So you have to understand, okay, it is Bragg arc method. So in that case you have to draw the diagram as well as you have to write the explanation also. So here we will see that first of all in the inner vessel we have to take dispersion medium in which you have to prepare the colloid. So you have to take the dispersion medium in the inner vessel. In the outer vessel you have to take ice cubes. Okay, so ice cubes should be kept around the inner vessel. So here we will see that from all the sides ice cube must be in contact with the inner vessel. Here when we are passing electricity through the metal electrodes, okay, these electrodes may be the electrodes of gold, silver or platinum. So whatever metal you require to prepare the colloid, that metal is taken as the electrodes. Here we will see that when an electric arc or electric spark is given to the metal electrodes, the metal will convert from solid to gas. So here we will see that solid metal will convert into gaseous metal, and afterwards when it will cool down it will convert into small solid particles of colloidal size. So here we will see that such a high voltage is given that the whole beaker or vessel will get heated. So in order to cool it down, ice cubes are kept surrounding it so that the heat released from the wall of the vessel will be absorbed by the ice cubes. So here we will see that solid metal will convert into gaseous metal, and that gaseous metal after cooling down will convert into small particles of the colloidal size. In this way we can prepare colloids of gold, silver and platinum. Now third method to prepare colloid is peptization. Here we will see that all these three methods are generally used for the preparation of lyophobic colloids, because as we have seen in our classification that lyophilic colloid can be prepared easily by mixing the dispersed phase and dispersion medium. But in case of lyophobic colloid, we have to use special methods in order to prepare lyophobic colloids. So this is the third method to prepare lyophobic colloid, that is peptization. What is the meaning of peptization? So the process of converting precipitates into colloidal size. So when we prepare fresh precipitates and afterwards when we shake these precipitates, so as these precipitates are fresh, they are very, the particles of the precipitates are very weakly bound. So when you shake these freshly prepared precipitates, they will, the particles as they are weakly bound in the precipitate, they will be broken down into colloidal size. So this process of converting precipitates into colloidal sol is called peptization. So here we will see that once we convert precipitate into colloids by shaking the precipitates, then there are the chances that this colloidal particle may again recombine and form precipitates. So in order to make these colloidal particles stable, we have to add some small amount of electrolyte. So when we are adding the small amount of electrolyte, these particles of electrolyte are going to form a layer surrounding the colloidal particles. So if electrolyte is forming a layer surrounding the colloidal particles, so what will happen? Okay, because of the layer of electrolytes surrounding the particles, they will not be able to combine with each other, and so for again precipitation will not take place. So that means colloidal sol may be kept stable for long time by addition of small amount of electrolyte. Now here we will see that during peptization, the precipitate absorbs one of the ions of the electrolyte on its surface. So here we will see that suppose we are converting precipitate into colloid by shaking it in the presence of electrolyte. Then in that case, suppose we are having ferric hydroxide precipitates. So here we will get the colloidal sol of ferric hydroxide. Now in this case, we have to add such electrolyte whose either positive or negative ion should be similar to the ion of the colloidal particle. So if we are having ferric hydroxide, then electrolyte can be chosen as ferric chloride, because both ferric hydroxide and ferric chloride have common Fe plus 3 ion. Okay, Fe plus 3 ion. So in that case, what will happen? Here we are having colloidal particles of ferric hydroxide. Now here Fe is common in the colloidal particles and electrolyte, so that means Fe3 plus ion is going to form a layer surrounding the colloidal particles. So here we can see that when we are adding electrolytes, both the ions of electrolyte are not sticking with the surface of the colloidal particles, but that ion which is common to the ion of the colloidal particle, that ion of the electrolyte, that is positive ion over here, is common in both of them, so it will stick with the surface of the colloidal particles. So now we can see that as both the neighboring colloidal particles are carrying the same positive charge, that means they will repel each other because of same charge. So this is the reason why these colloidal particles will not combine and they will not form precipitates. So in this way, by the addition of electrolyte, we can increase the shelf life of the colloidal sol. In some cases, it's not necessary that in every example positive ion of the electrolyte gets adsorbed on the surface of the colloidal sol. In some cases, negative ion of the electrolyte is common to the sol. So in that case, negative ion of the electrolyte will stick with the surface of the sol. Now next topic is purification of colloidal sol. Colloidal solutions, when prepared, generally contain excessive amount of electrolytes and some other impurities. So here we can see that when we are preparing the colloidal sol, we are adding some amount of electrolyte in peptidization, but less amount of electrolyte should be added in order to form a layer on the surface of the colloidal particles. If you are adding excess amount of electrolyte, then instead of becoming helpful for keeping the colloid stable, it will become disadvantageous, because in that case what will happen, if extra electrolyte will be there, then the surface of the colloidal particle which is covered by electrolyte will be disturbed. So in that case the electrolyte from the surface of the colloidal particle will get removed, and so the colloidal particle will recombine to form precipitates. So that's why excessive amount of electrolyte should not be there in the colloidal solution. And some other impurities are also possible which may make the colloidal solution impure, and so the stability of colloidal solution will decrease. So it is very much necessary to remove excessive amount of electrolyte and other soluble impurities. While the presence of traces of electrolyte is essential, as I have told you, for the stability of colloidal solution, large quantities coagulate it. So if large quantities are there, so they will precipitate the colloidal sol. That's why it is important to reduce the concentration of the impurities to the required amount. The process used for reducing the amount of impurities to the required minimum, or we can say requisite minimum, is known as purification of colloidal sol. The purification of colloidal solution is carried out by the following methods. So here we will see that there are three methods for the purification of colloidal sol. First is dialysis. As you can see that here diagram of dialysis is given. In dialysis, it is the process for removing a dissolved substance from the colloidal solution by means of diffusion through the suitable membrane. So here we will see that we will take dialyzing membrane. Okay, it will be having a material similar to filter paper. So such dialyzing membrane is there. In the membrane we have taken the colloidal sol, which is required to be purified, and this dialyzing membrane is kept in the trough or a vessel containing water. Here the inlet of water is at one side of the trough and the outlet is on other side. The inlet is always kept at a lower height while outlet is kept at the higher height. So here we will see that when water enters into the trough, it will pass through the holes of the membrane to the other side. So you'll see that it will squeeze into the dialyzing membrane and thereafter it will squeeze out of the membrane. So in that case what will happen, whatever impurities will be there inside the colloidal sol, that will be taken away by water through the membrane, and afterwards water along with the impurities will come out of the vessel. So these impurities are actually also known as crystalloid. So water will take out all the unnecessary impurities or crystalloid from the colloidal sol. So in that way the colloidal sol can be made pure. Here we will see that in dialysis method the movement of water is very slow, and the vessel which is used is known as dialyzer. Now in order to speed up this dialysis, second method is used which is called electrodialysis. The arrangement of the apparatus in electrodialysis is same, only the thing is that at the two ends of the vessel, outer vessel, two electrodes are kept, anode and cathode, positive and negative electrodes. So because of the flow of electricity, movement of water will become faster, so entry and exit of water will become very rapid, and we will see that whatever extra electrolyte will be there inside the colloidal sol, suppose ferric chloride is the electrolyte, so that will come out of the membrane, and the Fe3 plus ion being positively charged, they will get attracted towards the negative end, and Cl minus being the negative ion, it will be attracted to the positive electrode. So in that way all the positive and negative ions of the electrolyte present in the dialyzing membrane can be removed out. and the colloidal solution may be made pure. Now let us see the third method. Third method is ultrafiltration. Now here we will see that figure 5.10 is nothing but it is electrodialysis diagram. Now let us see ultrafiltration. Ultrafiltration is the process of separating the colloidal particles from the solvent and soluble solutes present in the colloidal solution by specially prepared filters which are permeable to all the substances except the colloidal particles. So in case of ultrafiltration, suppose if you have to filter sand from water, separate sand from water, then what we will do, we will take a funnel, then we will take a filter paper, we will make a cone of the filter paper, put on the funnel, then you will allow the sand water to pass through the filter paper. So sand will remain above the filter paper but water will come out. But if we talk about colloids such as milk is the colloid. By putting an ordinary filter paper on the funnel, can you separate the white protein of the milk from water of the milk? No, we cannot. Okay, because the size of the ordinary filter paper, pore size, whole size of the ordinary filter paper is very big. So in that case, in order to separate the colloidal particles from the colloidal sole, we have to use specially prepared filter papers known as ultrafilters. So here we will see that these filters can only allow all the substances to pass through it except colloidal particles. So colloidal particle, that is dispersed phase, cannot pass through the special filter papers which are known as ultrafilter papers. Only dispersion medium can pass through it. Colloidal particles can pass through the ordinary filter paper because of the pore size is too large. However, the pores of filter paper can be reduced in the size by impregnating with colloidal solution to stop the flow of colloidal particles. So what can we do? That we can take an ordinary filter paper and convert and decrease its pore size. So how can we decrease its pore size? So put this ordinary filter paper in the solution known as colloidal. So what is colloidal? Colloidal is the solution which contains 4% solution of nitrocellulose. So nitrocellulose is taken as a solute and it is dissolved in the alcohol ether mixture. So that means in this colloidal solution, solute is 4% nitrocellulose and solvent is alcohol ether mixture. So in this solution we have to dip the entire ordinary filter paper. Then afterwards what will happen, ki the pore size of the ordinary filter paper will get reduced, because here the nitrocellulose solution will start getting deposited in the pores. So that's why the pore size will get reduced to the size smaller than the colloidal size, so that it may not allow the colloidal particles to pass through it. So we will see that after soaking the filter paper into this colloidal solution, thereafter you have to take it out and thereafter you have to dry it, or hardening it is done with the help of formaldehyde. So after soaking the filter paper in the colloidal solution, it is taken out and hardened by formaldehyde, and thereafter it is finally dried. Thus by using ultrafilter paper, the colloidal particles are separated from rest of the materials. Ultrafiltration is a slow process. Okay, so very slow filtration will take place. So what we can do, that in the funnel which is used in the ultrafiltration, that can be connected with the suction pump, or it can be connected with the suction pump so that a pressure may be applied. Okay, so if you take the funnel that is connected with the suction pump from the lower end, so that this pump will suck the air from below the funnel, and so the liquid will start coming out rapidly. The colloidal particles left on the filter paper. So because of the small pore size of the filter paper, colloidal particles will left behind on the filter paper. They can, now they are pure, because here dispersion medium along with the impurities will come out. So now the colloidal particles are pure. So we may take these pure colloidal particles in the other vessel, and then we can add fresh dispersion medium, or we can say fresh solvent, and in that way we can get a pure colloidal solution. Now next is properties of colloidal solutions. Okay, what are the properties of colloidal solutions? The first is colligative properties. That means colloidal particles, as they are bigger in size, because they are made up of aggregates of the small particles. So that means there will be a number of particles in the colloidal solutions, and the number of particles in the colloidal solution is small as compared to number of particles in true solution, as true solution is having smaller particle size and colloidal solution is having bigger particle size. So number of particles in the colloidal sol will be less in number. Hence their values of colligative properties depend upon the number of particles, but their values will be smaller as compared to the values of the true solutions. So which are the colligative properties which you have studied in chapter number 2? So they are relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation in boiling point, depression in freezing point, and osmotic pressure. So these four properties will have their values dependent on the number of particles. Second is Tyndall effect. Colloidal solutions show Tyndall effect. That means when the light is passed through the colloidal sol, it makes the path of the light visible. So for that we will take over here light source. So light source is taken over here. Then here colloidal solution is taken in the vessel. In between the light source and vessel we have kept one convex lens in order to converge the light. So here we will see that the light coming out of the source will pass through the convex lens. It will undergo convergence so that it will meet, all the rays of light will meet at one point. At this point there will be a position of colloidal particle, and from the surface of the colloidal particle these light rays will get scattered in different directions. So that means from the scattered light which is reflected from the surface of the colloidal particle, we can easily come to know about the position of colloidal particles. So we can see these reflected rays with the help of microscope. So when we are putting the microscope perpendicular to the path of the light at 90 degree, then we will be able to see the visible path. So here we will see that this cone which is formed over here is called Tyndall cone. Here we will see that when we are observing the light, reflected light from the microscope perpendicular to the path of the light, it appears to be blue in color. The path of light appears blue in color, and when we are observing the transmitted light from the other side, then it will appear red in color. So this effect is called Tyndall effect. So colloidal particle being bigger in size as compared to the particles of true solution, they become obstacle or hindrance in the path of the light, and so we will see that it shows a mild strong opalescence. Okay, so bright light is seen which appear bluish from above and red from the other side. In our day-to-day life, Tyndall effect can be observed during the projection of picture in the cinema hall. So you might have seen that when a projector is kept behind, and from there whenever a film is projected on the screen, so in the path of the light of the projector we can see dust particles moving. Okay, so these dust particles, they scatter the light, as well as you can also see Tyndall effect in case of in front of the headlight of the vehicle during night time. Okay, so at night you might have seen that when the front headlight of the vehicle is kept on, then in the path of the headlight we can see the dust particles and smoke also. So that is because they create hindrance or obstacle in the path of the light. So Tyndall effect is observed only when the following two conditions are satisfied. Number one is the diameter of dispersed particles is not much smaller than the wavelength of the light used. So that means either the diameter of colloidal particle of the solution should be equal to the wavelength of light. So wavelength of the light is the distance between two consecutive crests. So this distance and the diameter of the particle should be equal, or we can take the light having a wavelength smaller than the size of the particle. So colloidal particle may create obstacle only when the wavelength is either equal to the size of the particle, or wavelength should be smaller than the size of the particle. Because if wavelength would be bigger than the size diameter of the particle, then it would be easily jump, it will easily jump from above the colloidal particle. So in that case particle may not create obstacle. So that's why wavelength should be equal to the diameter of particle or smaller than the diameter of the particle. Second, the refractive indices of the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium differ greatly in magnitude. So dispersed phase and dispersion medium should have different magnitudes of refractive index. Then only the Tyndall effect can be observed. Now we'll see the Tyndall effect is used to distinguish between colloidal and the true solution. Zsigmondy in 1903 used Tyndall effect to set up the apparatus known as ultra microscope. So he used Tyndall effect in order to standardize the ultra microscope, means in order to arrange the ultra microscope he used Tyndall effect. An intense beam of light, that is a bundle of rays of light, is focused on the colloidal solution contained in a glass vessel. The focus of the light is then observed with the microscope at right angles to the beam of light. As we have seen that beam of light and the microscope are perpendicular to each other. Individual colloidal particles appear as bright stars. So in the solution you will see individual colloidal particle as bright stars because of the reflection of the light from the surface of the particle against the dark background. Ultra microscope does not render the actual colloidal particles visible. So we can see that with the help of ultra microscope you cannot see the particles. You can only see the we can only see the scattered light, and from the point where scattered light is observed we can only imagine, okay, here from this point if light is getting scattered, that means here there should be colloidal particle. So we can only obtain the information about the position of colloidal particle, but we cannot obtain any information about the size or the shape of the colloidal particles. Number 3 is the color of the colloidal particle. Third property, color. The color of colloidal solution depends on the wavelength of light scattered by the dispersed phase. The dispersed particle, when they are scattering a light of a particular wavelength, then whatever light will be scattered by the particle, that light will enter into our eyes, and that's why the color of the particle will be seen as per the color of the light entering into our eyes. So whatever colored light enters in our eyes, that decide the color of the colloidal particles. The wavelength of light further depends on the size and nature of particles. because we know that for the light to be scattered, it is necessary that the wavelength of the light should be equal to or smaller than the diameter of colloidal particles. So depending upon the size of the colloidal particle, the color of the light is scattered by it. For example, a mixture of milk and water appears blue when viewed by the reflected light and red when viewed by the transmitted light. So already we have seen, suppose here milk solution is given. So whatever light is reflected, so that can be seen at a 90-degree angle, that can be seen as blue. And transmitted light, if you observe from here, it will appear to be red. So reflected light appears as blue to us and transmitted light as red. Even we will see that with the change in the size of the soul of the same element also changes the color of the light emitted. For example, if we talk about gold soul, in gold soul, if the particles are very small, then it appear red. If particles of gold in the solution is somewhat bigger, then in that case the soul will appear as purple. Okay, the same substance is there, gold is there, but with the increase in the size of the particle, the light scattered by the particle also changes. So initially when very fine particles of gold are there, they they emit red color light. If somewhat bigger particles are there, they will emit purple color light. If the size of the gold particle further increases, they emit blue color light. And when the gold particles are very bigger in size in the colloidal soul, then they finally emit golden color. That's why we can see that when gold is in the bulk amount, it appears golden. So RPBG, that you have to remember, RPBG. So red, purple, blue and green. Now fourth property is Brownian motion or Brownian movement. We see that when we take a colloidal solution, for example milk, so particles of milk do not settle down as in case of suspension, but they are particles of milk are continuously moving. That's why we can see the whole milk as white in color. So here we can see that what is the reason that the particles of dispersed phase are continuously moving in the solution. So that the reason is Brownian movement or Brownian motion. When the colloidal solutions are viewed under a powerful ultra microscope, the colloidal particles appear to be in a state of continuous zigzag motion all over the field of view. So here we can see that colloidal particles are continuously moving. First it was over here, then over here, then it is over here. Okay, so continuously the particles of colloidal soul are moving in a zigzag manner. So what could be the reason behind it? That in the colloidal soul, the particles of dispersion medium are already present. Now the particle of dispersed phase, when it collides with the particle of dispersion medium, it is bounced back, then it is reflected back. Thereafter it will collide with the second particle of dispersion medium, from there it will reflect back. Then from the third particle of dispersion medium, again it is reflected back. So here we can see that due to continuous reflections by the dispersion medium, colloidal particles move in the solution in the zigzag manner. This motion was first observed by the British botanist Robert Brown. Botanist means the scientist who is studying plants. Okay, so he actually took water. In the water he took pollen grains. Okay, and he studied the movement of the particles of pollen grain in water, and pollen grains are having the size of the colloids. So this motion is independent of the nature of the colloid. So it does not depend upon the nature of solute, but it depends on the size of the particles of colloid. So if the size of the particle is very small, then zigzag movement will be more random and more it will be more. Okay, frequency of collisions will be more, so movement will be more. It also depends on the viscosity of solution. If water is taken which is less viscous, then zigzag movement will be to large extent, and if the viscous dispersion medium is there, then this zigzag movement will be less. So it depends upon the size of the particles of colloids as well as viscosity of the solution. Smaller the size of the colloidal particles and lesser the viscosity of dispersion medium, faster is the motion. The Brownian movement has been explained to be due to the unbalanced bombardment of the particles by the molecules of dispersion medium. So here we can see that the molecules of dispersion medium which are already present, they they behave as an obstacle in the path of the dispersed phase. So particles of dispersed phase will continuously undergo collision with the particles of dispersion medium, due to which they will reflect back. So due to multiple reflections, we can see zigzag movement of the colloidal particles known as Brownian movement. Brownian movement has a stirring effect. Okay, so it has the same effect as we are having when we stir the spoon in the solution. So when we are stirring the solution with spoon, in the same way here stirring is not required with the spoon, it will itself have the stirring effect due to Brownian motion, and this stirring effect does not permit or does not allow the particles to settle down at the base of the vessel. So due to Brownian motion only, we will see that gravitational force is nullified and cancelled out, and so the particles are stable in the colloidal sole. That's all for today.